My parents live high up in the mountains, a little to the west of Denver. Last weekend, my fiancée Rachel and I drove up to their house for dinner. I go to school in Colorado Springs, which means I normally drive east out of the mountains before heading south on the highway towards my apartment. But this time, when I put my address into my GPS, I noticed that there was a slightly faster route that wound back and forth while staying in the mountains. After talking it over with Rachel, we decided to follow the new path. The moon was full, the car had plenty of gas, and we were in an adventurous mood. The beginning of the drive passed without incident. I knew most of the roads near my parents, and the full moon washed everything out with a pale light that made following the signs quite easy. The road took us deep into the mountains, and soon the winding path was rough and bumpy from lack of use. We'd been driving around for half an hour when Rachel turned on the radio. Everything was static. I made some comment about how we're in the mountains and we should expect reception to be tough out here, but Rachel didn't answer. Instead, she continued turning the knob in search of a new station. Eventually, she stopped the dial when she heard a voice. At first, I thought it was one of those Christian radio stations that play out in the country, but as I listened, I realized it was something more like a public service announcement.
I repeat, all cars driving on Pikes Lane, there's a major rock slide blocking the road near Adler's Junction. We recommend that all drivers take Manitou Drive as a detour.
I looked down at my GPS, saw that we were driving on Pikes Lane, then scrolled along the road until I found a road marked Manitou Drive. At this point, Rachel wondered out loud if we should just turn around and go home. But I said we'd already been driving for half an hour, and that meant adding an hour till we got home. So I tapped the screen to add the turn to my GPS. About 10 minutes later, I turned right onto Manitou Drive. It wound back and forth down into a valley. After another 10 minutes or so, we arrived in a small town. There didn't appear to be any other exit outside of the lone road that had carried us there. The only light within 100 feet came from a rundown gas station. My phone didn't have any service at this point, so I pulled into a parking space and walked inside, hoping to get directions to the rest of the detour. The man behind the counter was in his late 50s and smelled horrible. Not just the smell of body odor, but of something worse, like he'd been working with rotting animals a few minutes back. "Hey," I said. "We were driving and got detoured through this town. Is there a way south through here? We're just trying to get down to Colorado Springs." A smile stretched across the man's face.
Oh yeah, just keep driving through town.
His voice was somehow familiar, but I was too distracted by the smell to give it too much thought. I thanked him for the information, returned to my car, and set off down the road with Rachel. Not 30 seconds later, the radio crackled.
My friends, it is time. We gather at the square.
I looked up at Rachel. She was staring at the radio with a concerned expression.
Was that the same guy that announced the rock slide?
I think so. It sounded like it. I continued driving through town, following the path he'd laid out. It came to a dead end at a bunch of trailers. I tried to check the map on my phone, but I still had no service. At this point, I said, "Well, I guess we have to go back." So we started driving back along the winding roads through town when my headlights illuminated something blocking the road. I pulled my car to a stop, staring out at what was clearly a tied-up woman laying on the ground. I said. Thankfully, Rachel was quicker on her toes than I was.
"Baby, drive. Drive quickly."
I turned to follow her eyes. No less than 40 dark figures emerged from behind the rundown buildings surrounding us. They were holding candles and they were running towards our car. I slammed my foot down on the gas, narrowly avoiding the woman tied up, and sped off down the road. The radio crackled to life again.
Come back, join our celebration.
Rachel was 100% correct. It was the same man in the gas station. The same man who'd announced the rock slide and brought us into town. In a state of full panic, I didn't stop driving until I reached my parents' place. Later that night, I looked up some news articles and found several that mentioned drivers going missing near the town we'd driven through. I thought of the tied-up woman and we considered filing a police report, but we didn't think we had sufficient evidence. More than anything though, I just hope no one else experiences what we did that night on Manitou Drive. Last Saturday, my girlfriend Jane, my puppy Jack, and I were all getting ready for a road trip. We were planning on meeting friends at their house and then starting the trip from there. On our way to their house at around 11 a.m., a white car with all tinted windows cut us off and brake checked us, close enough that I had to slam the brakes and swerve to avoid an accident. In my immediate anger, I honked and flipped the driver off. I wish I hadn't done that. Immediately, the driver rolled down his window and waved his hand, calling us over. He switched lanes and slowed down so that our cars were parallel to one another. The driver started gesturing wildly and yelling at us while we continued driving down the avenue. I attempted to make gestures to calm down and then tried to ignore him and continue driving, but the man just continued driving right next to us. Eventually, I tried speeding up, but he revved in front of me and tried brake checking me again. At this point, I swerved to the other lane, and again, he slowed down to match my vehicle's speed. This man was still gesturing and screaming while I tried my best to ignore him. Suddenly though, he reached in his lap, and I noticed he was holding a glass bottle. Then, without a warning, he threw it, and it shattered at the side of my vehicle, spraying amber-colored alcohol all over my windshield. My girlfriend Jane was hysterical at this point, and the puppy had hidden himself under the passenger seat. I went into adrenaline mode and tried turning into different streets as the chase ensued. He was following close behind me when he threw another glass bottle that shattered against my back window. I told Jane to call the police as we sped down a 2-lane street and up a hill. She called 911 as I came to a stop at the light at the top of the hill. The guy chasing us slowed down to a stop behind us. Out of nowhere, he hopped out of his vehicle, and in my rearview mirror, I saw him reach back into his car and grab something that he put into his shorts. He began walking towards my side of the car as the car in front of me drove away. I said fuck that, slammed the gas, and turned into the next avenue. Within a minute, he caught back up to us. I was now on speaker with 911, explaining the situation and giving them details of his car and appearance. Jane was full on crying as we sped down a busy avenue, weaving in between cars at 20 above the speed limit. I updated the 911 lady with our current location, and she told me to try to drive to the station. At the next red light though, the man pulled up next to us and yelled,
"Do we have a problem? Don't fucking flip me off."
I tried to gesture that no, we didn't have any problem. The man ignored me though, and tried to goad me to get me out of the car. The light was still red, and again, he hopped out of his vehicle. Not wanting to take any chances, I floored it through the red light as he sprinted back to his car and continued chasing us. At this point, we were accelerating and brake checking each other as he tried to drive us off the road. Knowing we were just a couple minutes away from the station, I began making gestures that he should continue following us. But about 1 block from the station, we got stuck in a busy intersection. There were many cars around us as he again exited his vehicle and walked up to my car. This time though, I was completely boxed in, and Jane started full-on panicking. I felt like such an asshole for provoking him and putting her in danger. I rapidly scanned around me, looking for any escape options, to no avail. The people around us noticed the commotion, and many just put up their windows and locked their doors. The man came right up to my window, slapped it with his palm, and asked again if there was a problem.
"Is there a fucking problem?"
Again, I adamantly said no. The 911 lady told me not to engage over the phone speaker. The man said,
"Yeah, that's right."
and with a glare, he got back into his car and then sped away. We ended up meeting with the cops, and I updated them with more details of his direction and his last known location, but they say there was nothing they could do as we didn't have a dash cam installed. A word of advice to drivers: tread carefully, as you never truly know who you're driving next to on the road.